Labor pains? Go to the hospital. I'm traveling with my mom. Call me when the baby is born.
My husband took off to Hawaii with my mother-in-law, leaving me in pain. A few days later, he called me to ask if the baby was born. I told him the truth.
Huh?
I heard his dumb voice, so I hung up the phone. I am Lara, a 28-years-old office worker. My husband Harry is also 28, and we got married 2 years ago after an office romance. My in-laws live in the next town, but Harry was the second son, so he told me before we got married that he didn't think it would mean living with his parents. When I asked him about other details, he told me that his mother was traditional and prefers her first son. And there was a considerable difference in the treatment of Harry and his older brother. So Harry did not seem to like much a family. In fact, at the time our wedding greetings, my mother-in-law said, "The eldest son will take over this house, so don't count on the inheritance of the family." I had never counted on it in the first place, but after hearing this, I had not a good impression of my in-laws. At the time, my mother-in-law and brother-in-law lived alone at my parents' house because my father-in-law was working alone overseas, and when we visited them, my mother-in-law was like, "I have to cook dinner and do laundry for your brother. So can you go home as soon as you are done here?" Harry apologized to me on the way home every time for his mother-in-law's attitude. However, a turning point came to us. Harry's elder brother had eloped with his fiancée and disappeared. My mother-in-law had a big problem with my eldest son's fiancée and said something like, "As the eldest son's wife and my daughter-in-law." She pressured her and made fun of her. My mother-in-law was very much against the marriage, but her first son decided to leave my mother-in-law to protect his fiancée's mental health and to marry her peacefully. This led the mother-in-law to turn the brunt of her affection toward Harry.
At first, I didn't like the fact that she was leaning on me because my brother was gone. It is like as if I replaced my brother.
And he refused to accept such an attitude from his mother. However, his mother tried to win Harry over in every way she could, and Harry gradually softened his attitude toward her. And so, a few months after the eldest son disappeared, he was saying,
"My brother is the worst kind of man. He has caused trouble to my mom so many times. And now that is how he is returning the favor. I'm ashamed to be a brother to such a man."
I was glad that his relationship with my mother-in-law had been restored. But I began to feel a little uneasy about him taking her side any longer. Harry and I were in the same company, so we had the same days off, and we often spent holidays together. However, Harry began to go out to his mother's house every holiday, as his mother invited him.
I feel sorry for my mom, because my dad is having an affair, and my brother is away. So I want to spend my holiday with my mom as much as possible.
That's what he told me. I understand how you feel, but I want you to spend more time with me as a couple.
We go back to the same house on weekends, and it would be fine if we could at least use the time off for mom. I mean, Lara, come with me.
Have you forgotten how you were told to get the hell out of there before? Or how you were treated so evilly? Besides, your mother wasn't very welcoming me.
Things were different then. So how long are you going to talk about the past?
Harry's comment surprised me, but I had seen his change and decided to accompany Harry on his visit to my parents-in-law's house in the faint hope that perhaps my mother-in-law's attitude towards me might have changed as well. On the following holiday, when I visited my in-law's house with Harry, I realized that I had been naive. My mother-in-law met us at the front door, and upon seeing my face, she blatantly frowned at me. I immediately realized that I was not welcome. But Harry, who was completely oblivious to the situation, told his mother smilingly that I wanted to spend the holiday with him. So that's why he brought me along.
Oh, Lara, you must be tired from work. Why don't you take a good rest? I'm working too, Mom. And Lara has enough energy to play around, so don't worry about it.
Harry's good-tempered words made my mother-in-law smile, as if she was up to something. And this expression was not my imagination, but rather my mother-in-law began to say various things to me.
My body has been hurting lately, and I can't even clean properly. Lara, can you clean the house for me?
At first, it was just this kind of request, but gradually her demands escalated. She began to send me out to buy groceries, arrange gifts for relatives, and even clean my mother-in-law's friend's house. While I was dealing with my mother-in-law's request, Harry and my mother-in-law were firmly enjoying their holidays, going out to eat, to the movies, the massage, and so on. After the first few times, I told Harry, I'll stop going to your parents' house because all I do is help your mother, and you go out with her, so there's no point in going.
As a wife, you could at least help out at your husband's parents' house. Besides, we go to their house and leave the house together. And in return, I'm taking you out to dinner.
So he refused my suggestion of not accompanying him to his mother's house. He says dinner, but it was only the same fast food restaurant. However, I couldn't disagree with his opinion because I indeed am the daughter-in-law, and ended up helping out at my in-laws' house on my days off, which meant I couldn't rest at all. The reason I didn't want to go to my in-laws' house was not only this, but also something else. Mindless words from my mother-in-law and Harry.
You were so cheerful when you were playing with me, so stop being so grumpy when you were helping my mother. Harry's ex-girlfriends used to smile at me all the time. The only reason you couldn't come to dinner with us in the first place was that you were too slow with your cleaning and stuff. How can you do your job like that?
Harry and my mother-in-law not only blamed me or my work, but also my parents.
How in the world did your parents educate Lara to be so slow at house chores? Even the last time I asked to arrange a gift for my relatives, you chose something that made me feel as if our house was poor. I had been asked to send gifts to her relatives, and my mother-in-law had asked me to pay for them. You always live on Harry's money, so you should pay for at least on an occasion like this.
She forced me to do so. We both work, so we live on our salaries together.
Are you saying that Harry's salary isn't enough?
No, it's not like that. My mother-in-law and I had a conversation in which she twisted my words, so I gave up the dialogue with her and followed her instructions about the gift. However, when one of the relatives who received the gift commented to me to thank me, my mother-in-law now started complaining about the kind of gift of what I sent them. My salary is not that much, so I couldn't send anything too expensive. But if it should be appropriate for you, I still think it would be better for you to choose the gift and pay for it from now on. As expected, I was also mad at my mother-in-law's unreasonable complaint, so I talked back. My mother-in-law still wanted to say something.
That's why I hate poor people.
And so she ended the conversation. My mother-in-law seemed to have told the story to Harry.
What did you say to Mom? You want money from her?
Harry was not in a good mood. She didn't like the gift I arranged for her relatives and called me poor, so I just asked her to make her own arrangements next time.
My mom just tried to teach you how to get along with your relatives as a wife later on, so she asked you to do so.
I've never met these relatives, and they didn't even congratulate me on my marriage. I can't send such an expensive gift to many households, and who is only a relative to my husband. Harry sighed deliberately in response to my reaction and said,
I'll pay for now on, and you will arrange it next time again.
No, I won't. I simply answered him. went into the bedroom and broke off the conversation. I had somehow sensed that my relationship with Harry was cooling down, and I knew I had to do something about it. But soon, I found out that I was pregnant. When I told Harry about the pregnancy, he was so happy that I was surprised by his reaction.
I'm going to work harder for you and the child, so if there is anything I can do to help, please let me know right away.
He stopped going back to my in-laws' house for a while and did house chores on his days off to take care of me, which made me very happy in the early stages of my pregnancy, as I had been feeling lonely about Harry's attitude. And then I reported to my mother-in-law as well as my father-in-law, who was working alone overseas.
I'm coming home once to celebrate.
He was going to visit me. My mother-in-law was very eager to know the sex of the child, and she repeatedly said,
Since this is your first child, you must give birth to a healthy boy and raise him to be the heir to our family.
When I found out the sex of the child was a boy, I wondered whether or not to tell Harry and my mother-in-law. Then, when I was in a stable stage of pregnancy, I visited my parents' home again. And at that time, my mother-in-law said,
If it's a boy, we'll take him in, and I'll raise him myself. My grandchildren will be happier if they are raised by me, who raised my two sons well, than by a mother like you.
Harry was also impressed by her words.
Lara, you have to work, and if my mom takes care of the child, you can focus on your work and work hard again.
I felt a sense of crisis at this time and decided to say, The child is a girl. I immediately lied. Then my mother-in-law looked at me with obvious displeasure and said,
Then, you should take care of it yourselves, because I have no obligation to raise a girl. Next time, have a boy.
I was stunned by this statement from my mother-in-law, but I remember feeling somewhat relieved that she would not interfere with me in any way. After this pregnancy report, my mother-in-law requested I help her do the chores.
Since you got in the stable period, come and clean our house.
However, I avoided this request by lying that I was suffering from morning sickness, and I did my best to avoid any contact with my mother-in-law during the pregnancy.
Since my mom is going to be a grandmother, it will be better for you to have a good relationship with her now, for the sake of the child, wouldn't it?
You're saying something like this so easily, but she hates me, I answered shortly to Harry, who once again began to take my mother-in-law's side, and Harry started going out to his parents' house again every other weekend. And this, although it was so close to the due date.
Once the baby is born, I won't be able to spend as much time with my mom. So I want to save some time to spend alone with her while I still can.
They even made plans for a trip to Hawaii. The baby will be born soon, and we cannot predict the due date so exactly. So please don't go on a trip overseas. I asked Harry repeatedly, but he would not listen to me at all. And I decided to tell my parents about the whole situation in case of an emergency. The reason I had not talked to my parents before was that if I told them, they would surely recommend divorce. And I wanted to avoid that option because I was hopeful of repairing the situation for the better. Then, a few weeks before my due date, I had tremendous contractions. Coincidentally, Harry and my mother-in-law were scheduled to leave for Hawaii in the evening, and my contractions started before noon, so I felt bad that their trip would be cancelled. But I asked Harry to take me to the hospital because I was having contractions. Harry rushed to take me to the hospital.
Does that mean you were going to have the baby today?
He asked the doctor.
It's prodromal labor, so it's not going to happen right away, but in a few hours.
He heard the doctor's reply to that point.
You're at the hospital. If anything goes wrong, it won't be a problem. Call me when the baby is born. I've been on the phone with my mom for a while now, rushing me to hurry up.
He walked away from the hospital, ignoring the doctors' and nurses' attempts to stop him. I was so disappointed in Harry's behavior. In my dazed state of consciousness, that I immediately contacted my parents. I could not give them the details of the situation, but my mother rushed to the hospital, and my father arrived later too, as my husband was not there at the time of labor. And I delivered a healthy baby boy later that day. While at the hospital, during my recovery, I explained to my parents what had happened, and they were, of course, furious and wanted me to get a divorce right away. On the third night after the birth of my child, I received a call from Harry.
I couldn't call easily because of the time difference. Is it time for the baby to be born?
Your daughter is no longer with us.
What do you mean?
I gave birth to a boy, so I never had a daughter in the first place. I suddenly remembered the lie I had told at the time, and decided to shock Harry and my mother-in-law. I can't live with you anymore, Harry. How could you go on an overseas trip at a time like this?
We don't need a wife who can't even bear a child.
I could hear his mother yelling behind him. Harry was putting the phone on speaker to listen to me, with his mother about the birth of our child. I decided to put mine on speakers as well for my parents and to record the conversation. So, do you agree that we'll get divorced? I didn't recognize you as my daughter-in-law at all, to begin with. So you made a complete stranger pay for the gifts for your relatives.
Don't talk to me like I'm a hustler.
Then please return the money.
I'll return such a small amount of money, you miser.
My parents got angry when they heard what my mother-in-law said.
You haven't even had a child yet. And you're brazen enough to call yourself my daughter-in-law.
I had a child, and it's a healthy boy. I will raise him well, so it's none of your business.
A boy? Then he is the heir of our family.
My mother-in-law's voice brightened a little at my words, and I couldn't endure anymore. That's not true. You've talked so many things about me, and you were so brazen as to make my son your heir. Please hear the rest from the lawyer after you come back to the States. I hang up the phone, listening to my mother-in-law and Harry ranting over the phone. Then, after leaving the hospital, I immediately returned to my parents' house and started to prepare for the divorce. With the help of my parents, I got a lawyer. Upon hearing this news, my father-in-law paid a visit to my parents' house before Harry and my mother-in-law returned, and I let him listen to the record of the phone call of the other day and explain how I have been treated by them. He also went to the maternity hospital and had the doctor who had treated me explain to him about Harry's behavior. A few days later, when they returned home, I met them together with my father-in-law and my lawyer and started a discussion even before they could settle down. Here, I demanded a divorce and child support from Harry.
If we knew the child is a boy, we would not have treated my dear daughter-in-law Lara like that.
My mother-in-law continued.
What do you mean by that kind of treatment?
That's what my father-in-law asked my mother-in-law. And as expected, she was reluctant to talk about what she had said and done. So she clammed up. I couldn't mention everything to him, but I let my father-in-law listen to the recording of the phone call of the other day. So you don't have to hide it.
You recorded it? What a nasty person you are. How dare you say that? You're talking about heirs, but this family is not that traditional. No, it doesn't need one.
My father-in-law shouted at her. Harry had been mumbling something to take his mother's side. Harry, you were the second son. So why don't you just shut up?
That has nothing to do with the situation right now.
He raised his voice loudly.
No, it has. I will sell this house, and money will be inherited by my eldest son. I'm going to cut ties with bloodless people like you. Do you mean my boy is coming back?
Harry seemed to be astonished at his mother's joy at the mention of her eldest son's name, and since then, he stopped talking to support his mother. I figured it was my mother-in-law's problem from here. So I decided to live with my lawyer. And a few days later, the divorce was finalized. And I was off to a fine start in life as a single mother. Apparently, my father-in-law really did sell off his house and sent my mother-in-law back to her parents' house. Then he went back to work overseas. He had been giving her quite a bit of money for living expenses. But after hearing about the incident of gifts for the relatives, he cut that living expense down to a much smaller amount. And my mother-in-law started working part-time at her own family's company. Harry first tried to take his mother under his wing. Because of your wife, I was evicted from my home, which was my only connection to my eldest son, and then it was sold. He was broken-hearted when his mother told him that. I explained the situation to the company and asked to work shorter hours. So the story of Harry and I's divorce spread throughout the company. And since one of the employees' mother was a nurse working at the maternity hospital, word of Harry's behavior also spread, and now he's feeling very ashamed of himself. As for me, I'm back at home, a little farther from the office, but my parents, who are excited about their first grandchild, are taking care of my baby, and I'm trying to rebuild my life while raising him comfortably. I have made up my mind that if I ever remarry and give birth to a second child in the future, I will raise this child with lots of love and without discrimination.
I saw a black liquid floating in the bathtub of my parents-in-law's house, so I let my husband go in first.
Wow, what's this? Can someone come in here?
I heard my husband's screams coming from the bathroom. I ran to the bathroom and was shocked to see him and screamed. When I looked at my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, they looked as if they were shocked. The culprits must be them. I heard their conversation in the morning. They were saying that they were going to end me. The real target was me. I dread to think what would have happened if I had been in the bath. I would never forgive them. As I made up my mind to do so, my husband, who was standing next to me, seemed to feel the same way. I'm Nicole, 35, and I work in a customer call center. My husband, Marvin, is my age and works in a factory. I met my husband at a 24-hour gym. I have been going to the gym for 3 years now, so I know who I see often. I didn't talk to anyone in particular and often exercised in silence while listening to music on my earphones. One morning, as I was about to use a machine at the gym, the belt on the machine came off. I was in a panic, thinking I might have broken it since that had never happened before. No staff was available to help me at the time, and I was scurrying around half conscious. No matter what I did, I couldn't get it back together, and it was my husband who reached out to me.
Are you alright? It's been coming off a lot lately.
And he fixed it easily. Thank you very much. My husband's body was muscular and very fit, and he was one of those people I often saw. We began to talk whenever we saw each other. We had a lot in common, such as being the same age and having jobs with irregular working time, and we found ourselves getting along very well. Even though it had not been that long since we met, I could talk with my husband, and without any formality, as if we had known each other for a long time. He was very comfortable. 3 months after the first day we spoke, we decided to start dating. After 2 years of dating, we decided to get married. I was very happy when he proposed to me, and I said yes right away. But my husband asked me if I would come live with his mother and sister. I had no intention of moving in with them. I had no idea what to say. My husband went on to say that he would lock our room for privacy.
I know you work irregular hours too, and you don't have to do the house chores or anything like that. My mom and sister don't work, so they can do it. If they say anything, I will do my best to protect you. Mom's got a bad leg, and she's having a lot of trouble without a man to help her."
That's what he said. I could tell that he was making sure to make my life comfortable. I think he also knows that I don't really want it. I had heard that my mother-in-law had fallen in a bathroom and was hospitalized for a while. Even if that was the case, I was troubled. I can't agree to it willingly. Could you let me think about it after I meet your mother-in-law and sister-in-law? My husband looked a little relieved when I said that. A week later, we went to greet his family. My husband lost his father-in-law 5 years ago. His mother-in-law was an office worker until she retired. My sister-in-law is 3 years older than us, divorced and recently starting living with her mother again. Welcome, and thank you for coming. When we entered the house, my mother-in-law greeted us with a smile. Hearing my mother-in-law's voice, my sister-in-law also came to the door and said, "Nice to meet you. I am Marvin's sister, and congratulations on your marriage," she said cheerfully. We then talked in the living room for a while, and both my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were very cheerful people, and I kept laughing while talking. I think I was able to talk with them without any worries. "Did you hear from Marvin about moving in together?" "Sorry, I'm the one with the bad leg," my mother-in-law said apologetically as we were leaving. "I won't interfere with your newlywed life." And my sister-in-law continued. I met them both and talked to them directly, which made me think it might be okay for us to live together, so I answered, No, I would love to." They all looked relieved and thanked me. I would be lying if I said I was not anxious, but I felt that with these people, I would be able to build a bright home. A month later, I moved in with my in-laws. As my husband had said, our room was locked, and my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were not allowed to enter. I was excited to think that our married life was about to begin. My husband and I both work irregular hours and have jobs with night shifts. We might often cross paths when we pack up our moving boxes, but we will cherish the time we have together. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law were as cheerful and kind as when we greeted them. They did most of the house chores, and I only needed to help sometimes. Since my mother-in-law seemed to have trouble walking, I tried to do what I could instead of her. One day, however, my husband was at work and I was off after a night shift. I came home in the morning and woke up in the late afternoon to find my mother-in-law and sister-in-law sitting at the dining room table. "Hey, why don't you try to be a little more active doing the house chores?" I was so surprised that I could not say anything. "It's a good thing you're in such good health, even though you stay in your room all the time." I thought I was dreaming, because she was talking like a different person from my usual mother-in-law and sister-in-law. I'm sorry, I'll be careful from now on," I replied, cringing. "Don't say unnecessary things to Marvin," said my sister-in-law. "Yeah, I got it," I answered, went to the sink and washed my face. I was still not sure if it was a dream or reality, but I did think that I had relied too much on my mother-in-law and sister-in-law for house chores, even though my husband had told me that was okay. I felt a little remorseful and took on many household chores that day. However, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law did not seem to like my house chores and repeatedly warned me about them. While I was cooking dinner, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were sitting on the couch, watching TV, and my husband came home.
"Nicole is making dinner? You must be tired after a night shift."
He looked surprised and was about to say something to my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. "No, I wanted you to eat my home-cooked food once in a while, so I'm in charge of dinner tonight." My husband looked very happy when I replied. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law seemed like different people during the meal than they were during the day. "It's so delicious, Nicole. You are a very good cook. You should teach me how to cook next time." They were so cheerful. I thought they must have two different personalities. After that, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law started giving me a hard time on the days when my husband was away. I used to live alone, so it's not that I can't do household chores. I was a little bothered by the warnings they give me because my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were always dissatisfied with my ability to do household chores. One day, while my husband and I were watching TV, my mother-in-law got up to go to the bathroom. She was having a bad day and seemed to be having a hard time walking, so I got up and helped her up. A few steps later, my mother-in-law suddenly fell.
Ouch, Nicole! Why are you pushing me?
She said, and she was cowering, holding her leg. I, of course, did not push her. From my point of view, it looked as if my mother-in-law had fallen on purpose. Hearing my mother-in-law's voice, my husband ran over to her and said,
Mom, are you okay? Nicole, did you push her?
And looked at me. When I tried to deny it,
She pushed me so hard. Actually, it happened a lot when Marvin wasn't around. It was awful because I knew that she didn't want to live with us.
and made a crying imitation. Then my sister-in-law came out of her room.
Mom, did she do it to you again?
She deliberately glared at me. I could not understand what is happening.
Nicole, if you have a complaint, tell me. You don't have to push my mom.
My husband yelled at me. In all the time I've spent with my husband, this is the first time he's ever raised his voice at me. My husband didn't see the moment my mother-in-law fell. I was shocked that he assumed I did it and that he didn't believe I wouldn't do such a thing. I did not do such a thing. I started to cry as I said this, so I ran away to my room. As I cried, I looked at my sister-in-law's face and she seemed to be grinning. It was definitely on purpose. After a while, my husband came to my room.
I'm sorry for yelling at you. Maybe it looked like you pushed her when you actually supported her because Mom is having trouble walking to begin with. So you don't need to worry,
he said. I was glad he apologized, but he didn't seem to believe in his wildest dreams that his mother had intentionally fallen. It also seemed as if he didn't believe me completely. I then stopped supporting my mother-in-law while working because I didn't want to be accused of anything. After a month later, I came home at 4 a.m. after working the night shift. I entered the house quietly so as not to make a sound, since that is the time when everyone is usually asleep. However, that day I felt as if someone was awake. I thought it might be my husband, and as I walked toward the living room, I heard a whisper from the bathroom. I put my ear to the bathroom door.
This must be the end of my daughter-in-law. Yeah, this will be the end for her.
I heard the voices of my mother-in-law and sister-in-law saying that. Their conversation sounded dangerous. I was terrified of what they would do to me. I went to my room being careful not to make any noise so that the two of them would not find me. I went to bed without taking a bath, but I couldn't sleep because I couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. I was going to a friend's wedding the next day. I hardly slept at all, but for fear of what they might do to me if I stayed in this house, I decided to leave the house for the day. I'm going shopping for the wedding tomorrow, and I left the house at the same time as him.
You didn't sleep much, didn't you?
He seemed to be worried about me. I called my husband that day and we decided to have dinner and then went home together. I could not talk to my husband about what has happened this morning. When we arrived home, my husband said,
There's a TV program I want to watch today.
He sat down on the sofa. My mother-in-law saw this and seemed to be very happy.
Nicole, you need to leave the house early in the morning to attend a wedding, right? Go take a bath first,
she said. I thought it was strange that she suggested I take a bath. I am usually the last to take a bath. I found it suspicious, so I went to the bathroom to look around and saw some black liquid floating in the bathtub. I couldn't quite figure out what it was, perhaps some kind of strange bath salts. But it smelled somewhat peculiar. But I am afraid to go in first because of the conversation I heard this morning. I made sure my mother-in-law and sister-in-law are talking in the kitchen and told my husband, "You still have 30 minutes before the show starts, so why don't you go ahead and take a bath?" I say in a voice that only my husband can hear.
You are right. I'll go take a quick bath.
And then my husband headed for the bathroom. I sat down on the couch instead of my husband.
What the hell? Can someone come in here for—
I heard my husband screaming from the bathroom. I think it was only about 3 seconds after I heard him get into the bath. I rushed over and saw that my husband's body was stained black. I screamed in shock. I looked behind me and saw my mother-in-law and sister-in-law standing there looking pale.
What is going on?
My husband looked panicked. I asked my mother-in-law, "You prepared the bath, didn't you? What is that black liquid?" My mother-in-law was cringing. "I thought you went to take the bath, Nicole." My sister-in-law is standing next to her in a cold sweat. Then my husband smelled the liquid and said,
Isn't this hair color by any chance? What are you going to do if it gets on your skin? It will be hard to get it off, right?
Neither my mother-in-law nor sister-in-law said anything, so my husband got out of the bath and moved to the living room. I had read on the internet that makeup remover would remove it, so I lent my husband the makeup remover and he tried his best to scrub it off, but it didn't seem to be coming off. I was horrified to think what would have happened if I had been in there. I have to go to a wedding the next day with black all over my body. On top of that, I have very sensitive skin. I had my hair dyed once, but even though I had it done with a skin-friendly colorant, it hurt so much during the process that I had to stop halfway through. My scalp was quite tingly and sore, and I was sick for a while after that. If I were to take a bath with hair color in it, I would not only be black all over. I would probably have been in serious trouble with itching and pain all over my body. Even scrubbing hard to remove it would have been very rough on my skin. I am horrified to think that my mother-in-law and sister-in-law knew about my sensitive skin and did it. I helped my husband get the hair color off his skin. Seeing us frantically trying to remove it, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law looked panicked and were whispering something to each other. It wasn't completely off, but it had gotten to the point where it was much less noticeable. "I need to talk to all of you. Please have a seat here." I called them to the dining room. "I heard something this morning. Around 4 a.m., you two were in the bathroom, right?" My sister-in-law replied, "What are you talking about? Of course we were sleeping in the early morning," she said vigorously, but she was impatient.
What were they talking about?
My husband asked. "They said that this is the end of his wife," I said, and my husband looked surprised.
What do you mean by that?
He asks. Then my mother-in-law said,
You were just sleepwalking. You don't have any proof of that.
I pointed at my husband and said, "This is the proof. And when we came home, you offered me a bath, didn't you?" I thought it was strange. I told you that I will attend a wedding tomorrow and that my skin was sensitive, right? My sister-in-law said, "It was just a prank." My husband said,
A prank?
My sister-in-law became silent when my husband said with a frightening look on his face. Then my mother-in-law said, "Nicole, it's all because of you. You don't cooperate with the house chores at all." She sounded like a child, Then my husband said,
Are you serious about that? Nicole works, so she does the house chores whenever she can, right? There are things you're allowed to do and things you're not allowed to do just because you are unhappy. Don't be silly.
He yelled at my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. I have put up with unreasonable things said to me until now. Do you have such a grudge against me? There is no way this can be just a prank. I absolutely will not forgive you guys. Hearing our words, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law began to cry. I'm sorry, we went too far. Then my husband said,
I will never forgive you either. I don't want to be with a family with people who do such things, and I want you to leave the house tomorrow.
You can't ask us to leave, we have nowhere to go, my mother-in-law said, but my husband answered,
I don't know about that. There's no way I can live with you anymore. Get ready to leave by tomorrow.
When I returned to my room with my husband, I burst into tears that I had been trying to hold back. I had been scared ever since I heard the conversation this morning. I'm sorry I let you take a bath after hearing that conversation. I cried and apologized to Marvin.
It's okay. I'm really glad you didn't go in there. I know you've been through some tough times, and I'm sorry I didn't recognize it.
Marvin hugged me. The next day, my husband forced my mother-in-law and sister-in-law out. My in-laws had moved just before we got married, and this house is in my husband's name, so he has the right to it. He changed the locks on the house while I was away at a wedding. Neither my mother-in-law nor sister-in-law work. They had a little extra money that we had given them for living expenses, but it was not enough to rent the house. They asked for a relative's house, but apparently my husband had told his relatives about what has happened, and they didn't welcome my in-laws. They both took out loans to rent a house, but they can't get approved at all because they don't work. They have little or no work experience, and since this story has become a rumor in the neighborhood, they can't even get a part-time job. Now they're both sleeping in an internet cafe. I think they deserved it. Now it's just me and my husband in our lives. We often don't see each other because of the irregular work hours, but when we have time, the two of us go to the gym together to exercise or go for a morning run. I feel very refreshed and spend time with him every day. On days when we can have dinner together, I cook a home-cooked meal.
You've just finished a night shift, so you don't have to work so hard.
But I am happy that my husband can enjoy my cooking.
It's so delicious. Have your cooking skills improved again?
My husband praises me every time. Such time is my happiness. There may be more difficulties in the future, but I hope we can stay together and help each other.
We bought a new house, and my husband wants his parents to move in, but my mother-in-law wants to kick me out.
My mom likes our new house, and she's moving in with us starting today, my husband said. If you don't want to live with us, then leave, my mother-in-law said. I didn't understand what they meant at all. I'm Jenny, 27 years old, a housewife, and currently pregnant. My husband Lucas is 30 years old, and he's an office worker. When I got pregnant, I knew that they would be crying at night with a baby, and we wanted to raise my child in a spacious place, not in a small apartment. So we decided to build a new house on my father-in-law's land. Now, when building a new house, there would be a meeting with the architect. I was soaring. I want a kitchen of this color. I want a bath like this. I think everyone dreams of the ease of use and the design they like, and it makes them excited. I was so happy to have a baby and a new house. However, I had a worry. Every time we had a meeting with the architect, my mother-in-law was always present. Why does your mother attend the meetings? I asked my husband. She did the renovation of my parents' house 3 years ago, so I should get some advice from my senior mother.
At one meeting, my mother-in-law said,
We need one more large room. There should be a large space for the Buddhist altar. She ordered us to have a large space for the Buddhist altar. What? The big Buddhist altar you have? It's an old-fashioned Buddhist altar in my parents-in-law's house. She wants to have a space for it in our house. And you want an additional room? It would become difficult to take care of the house if we had so much more rooms than we need, I said. You need to have a lot of rooms when building a house. She made a single-minded statement. Why does your mother decide everything about the house when she won't live together? I asked my husband. My mom is a senior home ordering professional because she has experience in remodeling. Besides, I've never made a mistake in my life by listening to my mom, he replied. But when are you going to take the Buddhist altar? We live separately, and that will happen after your father and mother have passed away. So if it's time, we could think about what to do with that. We can't have that big one at our home, I argued. Are you trying to speak badly of my mom? Who do you think you are? He was just like that, not listening to me. I didn't want to make space for Buddhist altar, so I decided to negotiate with my mother-in-law again at the next meeting. The room for the Buddhist altar is inevitably a dead space, I said. You think so because you're still young. When you reach 80, you will definitely feel more comfortable with more rooms. And then you will feel more at home with the Buddhist altar because I'm the same way. Oh, please get rid of those steps. We need a barrier-free house. And add handrails on the stairs. My mother-in-law did not listen to me. In the end, the house was built with a layout that my mother-in-law wanted. Barrier-free, handrails on the stairs, and an extra room for a large Buddhist altar for the future. I tried to prevent it until the construction began. My mom is professional. She can't be wrong. Don't speak ill of her. My husband kept repeating so. I couldn't discuss it with him. I couldn't talk back strongly about it because the house is being built on my father-in-law's land. If we don't have to pay for the land, the amount of repayment would be less. However, if we put all my mother-in-law's wishes into the house, the construction cost would naturally increase. I was very annoyed that I had to pay an additional cost to add more space only because my mother-in-law's wish. The architect understood the situation and suggested that we could reduce the cost by eliminating some parts. He made some suggestions to reduce the cost. Money will come back to you if you spend it comfortably. That's what my mother-in-law said. Well, the new house was completed. I was very happy to see the new house, and the smell of the new wallpaper made my heart flutter. Newly built houses smell really good. A few days after we moved in, my mother-in-law and father-in-law came with a housewarming gift. Thanks to you, we were able to build such a splendid new house. I thanked my father-in-law. In fact, it is. I feel that we probably would not have been approved for a large loan if we had purchased not only the house but also the land. My father-in-law smiled. The smell of our new house is so nice. Now you are ready to welcome a baby as a grandfather. I couldn't be happier, he said, his eyes narrowing at the thought of his yet-to-be-seen grandchild. My husband showed them around the new house, proudly displaying the Buddhist altar room. All that remained was to wait for the baby to arrive. But then, something unexpected happened. While we were having breakfast on Sunday, a moving company came to our house. The packages arrived. I had no idea what was going on. Anyway, I opened the door. I asked him if he had a wrong address, but the address was right. I was puzzled because I didn't understand the situation. I heard the sound of a bicycle warning, tinkle, tinkle, tinkle. It was my mother-in-law. She parked her bicycle in front of the house, pointed at the belongings in the moving truck with a straight posture, and began to instruct. Put this here, and this one there. What is going on? The scene was so sudden that I was at a loss for words. Then my husband, who had heard the commotion, came out of the front door. Scratching his head, he said, My mom liked the room for the Buddhist altar so much that my parents are going to move in with us starting today. What? Their belongings were suddenly brought in by the movers, and then I was told that we would have to live together. How is this possible? Then my mother-in-law said, "What are you just standing there like that, getting in the way of the moving in of our belongings?" She grabbed my shoulder and pushed me. "No, I'm not just standing here. I'm standing here in a daze. If I had been in good health, I would have said that back. But there was so much information to analyze that my head couldn't keep up. My mother-in-law seems to have noticed my pale complexion. I had been thinking about moving in together since the meeting with the architect. At first, I was listening to you to give you some advice. But gradually, your house became closer and closer to my ideal. And when it was done, your house was just perfect. So we decided to move in together. But what's wrong with you? Are you dissatisfied? If you don't like living together, then leave. This land belongs to my husband, so it's our house." The Buddhist altar room is for the baby's crib and cradle. I was thinking of putting baby stuff in that space. The empty room was supposed to be the baby's room. But now it's going to be the in-laws' room, and I'm being evicted. I couldn't accept the situation, so I came outside. The wind outside was still cold, even though it was early spring. It was just the right temperature to cool my head down. My cooled head started to spin. Then, I came to a question. Wait a minute. What about that parents-in-law's house that was fully remodeled 3 years ago? I went to visit my in-laws' house. When I visited, my father-in-law was standing at the front door. "Edward." He looked back at me and said briefly, "Let's go to your home." When I returned to my new house with my father-in-law, the moving of their belongings was almost finished. The moving van was no longer there. "What did you come back for? Do you mean you agreed to live with us, or are you prepared to be thrown out?" My mother-in-law, who was having tea with my husband in the living room, was grinning at me. "If you're going to leave, you will have to pack your own things." My father-in-law stood in front of my mother-in-law, who said such a thing without care. "Hey, we are leaving. If you don't want, get out of this house and out of my house." "Huh?" My mother-in-law dropped her teacup, and the red tea soaked the table. "Why? Lucas has agreed to let you stay here with us too, right?" My mother-in-law asked my husband. Lucas nodded quickly. "Because Mom said she wanted to do so," he said as if it was a matter of course. Hearing this, my father-in-law was furious. "How long are you going to keep putting your blind faith in your mother? You are already 30 years old. You should be mentally independent." I had never seen my father-in-law, who was always so mild-mannered, get so loud and angry. My husband's shoulders shook at the sound of his voice. "Your mom has changed." My father-in-law pouted in a muffled voice. "Where did you get the idea that if you spend money comfortably, you will get it back?" he asked my mother-in-law. I was surprised to hear such a familiar phrase. I heard that too. She said it during the meetings with the architect. I said so. "I knew it." My father-in-law nodded and told me what had happened so far. "She said she would spend money comfortably, then it would be returned to her. So her belief in Buddhism escalated. She started to entrust a fish and a lottery of about $5,000 to a shrine because she believed she would get the money doubled in value and returned to her." Entrusting a fish and double the money? I didn't even have time to ask back. "It's a true story, you know," my mother-in-law exclaimed in a tone of annoyance. "Because that's what it said on the internet." Internet? I was so surprised that I shouted even louder than my mother-in-law. Is it based on information from the internet, where anything can be false or true? I spoke my words little by little. My mother-in-law's belief in Buddhism is based on information from the internet? If you entrust a fish and entrust lotteries in value of $5,000, they will be doubled and returned to you? I was surprised that the basis for this was internet research. But my mother-in-law was very serious. Yes, you should search for money-saving actions or money-saving spells, and you will find them. My mother-in-law pushed her phone against me. I couldn't hold back any longer. What do you mean, search for a spell? What are you laughing at? How could I not laugh? My mother-in-law turned red and squealed like a monkey, and I couldn't stop laughing. Beside her, my father-in-law said, "Yeah, if it wasn't my wife, I would have laughed it off too." Looking at my father-in-law, I felt sorry and stopped laughing. It would have been unforgivable if my hard-earned money had been used in such a way. My father-in-law continued his words. "That's why I wanted to help you guys while I still had my savings, because one day I thought she was going to get her hands on my land." Then he looked at his wife. "I don't want all of you to be victims of my wife's wrong thinking. I thought enduring it and letting my wife do what she wants would be for the sake of my unborn grandchild." But my husband interrupted my father-in-law's explanation. "What the hell? Are you going to talk bad about my mom too, Dad?" My husband stood in front of my mother-in-law, as if he was defending her. I was annoyed by this situation. What are the attitude of my husband and the way he is talking to me and my father-in-law? I would never forgive them. I wanted to protect my father-in-law. In return for my husband standing in front of my mother-in-law, I stood in front of my father-in-law, and I nipped at my husband. Your mother's thinking that the internet is always right, and your thought that your mother is always right is the same. Your mother and you are really unfortunate adults who can't discern the truth of information. My father-in-law has had to endure my mother-in-law's extravagant spending all his life, and I was probably the first person to stand up for him. "Thank you, Jenny," he said in a small voice. "I thought I had given you the least by having you build a new house on my land. But at the same time, I was already running out of savings because of my wife. Then she suggested we go to Lucas, who had money because people and money gather where there is money or something like that." It's not about the truth and false of internet information. It's a problem with my mother-in-law's personality. She's completely like a hermit crab, going from shell to shell. But my husband and mother-in-law didn't give up. "But of course, you go where the money is. And if Mom wants to move in with us, she can. That's why Lucas built us an extra room and agreed to take over the Buddhist altar." Saying Mom is always right and the internet is always right, and the two of them were yelling and screaming. These two cannot be saved anymore, and my father-in-law and I looked at each other. If I had been at the beginning of my relationship with this husband, I would have said yes, you can say that for the rest of your life, bye-bye or whatever. I would have said goodbye to him. But now that I know how my father-in-law feels, I cannot simply leave. I felt a surge of righteous indignation that I had to make them go away for my father-in-law's sake, because he's the future grandfather of my baby. First of all, Grace, you are wrong. I told my mother-in-law directly. You say it's written on the internet. Well, why don't you search for Lucky Charm scrap or something? Seriously, no, I don't deny good luck. But if you want to make more money, it's much more practical for you to go to work than to entrust lottery tickets at the shrine though. At the very least, if you'd applied the time you wasted goofing around in meetings about our new house to a part-time job, you'd have a few tens of hundreds by now. And then you realize, what kind of effort does it take to get those tens of hundreds? How hard your husband worked to earn the amount of money you bought the lottery tickets you gave to the shrine. I told my mother-in-law that much at once. And now, I turn the blade of my words to my husband. And you, who believe your mother so much that you assume everything is right and don't even notice that you're about to be regulated, will not be capable of making the right decision for your child. In other words, it's a divorce. Huh? My husband's voice trailed off, as if he hadn't expected the conversation to proceed to the point of divorce. In contrast to him, my mother-in-law yelled, "Fine! Get out of here!" My mother-in-law spat at me. However, it was my father-in-law who blew away my mother-in-law's strong spirit at once. "You are divorcing me too," my father-in-law firmly told her. "What?" My mother-in-law looked back at my father-in-law. However, there was no way she could get hold of my father-in-law. "In the first place, I never thought I would live with my son and his wife. That house has just been remodeled, and I will continue to live there. Just as Jenny gave up on Lucas, I don't have the energy to support you anymore. Marry the internet or whatever. And that land is still in my name, so Lucas, you get out. You can do whatever you want with your mother, who you believe in. That house belongs to Jenny and her unborn baby. The baby should grow up with someone who can make good decisions." Huh? Thus, my husband and me and my in-laws each got a divorce. 6 months later, we got the divorce settlement. My father-in-law and I each lived in the house we owned, and my husband and mother-in-law were evicted from their respective homes. My brainwashed husband kept telling me that his mother was right on all fronts. "Then why don't you and your mother live together as you wish?" I told him, and then he said, "Yes, I will." They started living together in an apartment. After that, I heard that my ex-husband visited my father-in-law. "Even if I do as Mom says, the money will not increase. I want you to lend me money." My father-in-law said that he sent him away. My father-in-law has retired and is still working as a contracted employee. He enjoys going to a chess club as his hobby. "Now that she is gone, I can save money again." And sometimes he bought toys and was happy to come and visit his grandchild. When the grandson started to laugh and walk, "I date someone," my father-in-law told me shyly. The partner seems to be a member of the chess club. "She is a very intelligent person who judges tactics. She seems to have chosen me after analyzing me carefully." That sounds great. My father-in-law and I had big smiles on our faces.
My in-laws hadn't reserved a seat for me at their fancy family dinner, but in the end, they were the ones crying.
Oh no! I forgot to make a reservation for Miss Jones. I'm sorry. My mother-in-law pretended to look surprised and grabbed my hands. The 5 of us went to the restaurant together, but she purposefully didn't save a spot for me.
Honey, there's no need to apologize. We originally made this reservation for our son and grandson. We don't need to include strangers.
My father-in-law encouraged his wife as he laughed loudly.
Hey, Emery, be sure to pay the bill. How great is it to treat your family to a meal?
After my husband Jose spoke, my in-laws laughed even louder. Their classless laughter didn't match the quiet atmosphere of this expensive restaurant. My son, Liam, looked at me uncomfortably. I wanted to flip the table they were sitting at, but I had no energy to fight them anymore, and I didn't want my precious son to have to see that. I sighed and turned around. Fine.
I'll watch over Liam, so don't worry.
Bye, Emery Jones. Even after marrying her son, my mother-in-law always called me by my maiden name, Jones. Today, she said it again with an annoying smile on her face. She always harassed me like this, but...
Excuse me.
As I held back tears and went to pay at the front counter, a waiter suddenly grabbed my hand. Huh?
Miss Jones, no way.
It had never occurred to me that this could happen. To think that I got to meet him again, thanks to a waiter noticing what my mother-in-law said as she harassed me. From that moment on, my life completely changed. When did my married life first start falling apart? I lived together with my husband Jose and son Liam. The happy life we lived in our 3-bedroom apartment is a story from the past. I first met Jose in university. He looked like a model and had a way with words, so there were many girls chasing after him. The fact he chose me must have meant he really liked me, right? Jose was the type that always put himself first. He hid that very well, but as we became closer, I quickly found out. I can be indecisive and feel most secure when I'm following people. I was surprised when Jose confessed his feelings to me, but thinking about it now, it must be because he liked my weak personality. As we were dating, I began to question his personality, but since such a great person chose me, I told myself not to be too picky. After we graduated university, my doubts became stronger. Thanks to his father's help, Jose was hired by a large company and was given preferential treatment. He was an only son, so his parents definitely spoiled him. My father-in-law's acquaintance managed an apartment building, so he gave us a solid discount on our rent. I assumed that my in-laws were upset. Jose had chosen me because they had taken care of and arranged everything so well for him so far. My in-laws despised me. I will never forget the contemptuous look in their eyes when we first met. Hey, don't you think your parents really hate me?
Really? You don't need to pay attention to them. You're not marrying them, you're marrying me.
At the time, Jose sounded strangely reliable, so I made the mistake of listening to him and thinking that it would be okay. Jose and I got married, but his parents still didn't accept me as part of their family. Even now, they still call me by my maiden name. A year after getting married, I gave birth to our son, Liam. Without Liam, I would have given up a long time ago. For the first year after Liam was born, my in-laws' attitude slightly changed. They were really happy to be having their first grandchild, and my mother-in-law even thanked me for giving birth to Liam. Those were the first and last words of gratitude I'd ever hear from her. Once Liam turned 2 years old, things returned to how they used to be, if not worse. If my in-laws visited our home, they would only look at Jose and Liam. Jose was also cheating on me while I was busy with Liam. No matter how many times I thought to myself that I want to escape, I decided I should stay with Jose until Liam becomes an adult. I told myself that even a father like Jose was better than Liam not having a father at all. But then one day, it was the weekend and my in-laws had come over to play with Liam as usual. As they were leaving in the evening, they said something surprising.
Oh, right. Let's have a birthday party for Jose next week. I made a reservation at King. King? That's the restaurant our CEO's son manages, right? I've heard it's really hard to get a reservation there. Yeah, I made a special request to the CEO for you. My father-in-law proudly said to Jose. I expected that they'd want to go somewhere without me like they did last year, but my mother-in-law turned to me.
So, you should keep your schedule open too.
Huh? As I was still collecting myself from my shock, my in-laws left. I didn't understand what was going on, but this could be the first step of us fixing our relationship. I became somewhat hopeful. It was the day of Jose's birthday. We all gathered at the restaurant. Hearing that it was a high-class restaurant, I imagined a huge place, but it was actually pretty small. It was the type of place that only a select few customers could eat in at the same time. My father-in-law seemed very proud of himself. As we were entering, I saw a large engraved stone sign that said King. Seeing that name brought up some old memories, and I began to feel nostalgic. Thinking about it, there was a guy named King in high school. I began to smile without realizing. We were shown to a table in a private room. However, the table in the room had only 4 chairs. The waiter nervously turned to us.
I'm sorry, I will get one more chair for you. Oh, don't worry, 4 chairs are enough.
The waiter looked confused, but I immediately understood what my father-in-law was trying to say. My mother-in-law chimed in. Oh no, I forgot to make a reservation for Mrs. Jones. I'm sorry. My mother-in-law pretended to look surprised and grabbed my hands. The 5 of us went to the restaurant together, but she purposefully didn't save a spot for me.
Honey, there's no need to apologize. We originally made this reservation for our son and grandson. We don't need to include strangers.
My father-in-law encouraged his wife as he laughed loudly.
Hey, Emery, be sure to pay the bill. How great is it to treat your family to a meal?
After my husband Jose spoke, my in-laws laughed even louder. Their classless laughter didn't match the quiet atmosphere of this expensive restaurant. My son Liam looked at me uncomfortably. I wanted to flip the table they were sitting at, but I had no energy to fight them anymore, and I didn't want my precious son to have to see that. I sighed and turned around. Fine.
I'll watch over Liam, so don't worry.
Bye, Emery Jones. I heard more laughter behind me as I exited the room. I headed towards the exit as I wiped away tears that suddenly began rolling down my cheeks. The waiter that walked out of the room with me suddenly grabbed my hand.
Excuse me? Are you Mrs. Emery Jones?
Huh? Yeah. About the bill.
There's no need for you to take care of the bill. Please, follow me.
I wondered what was going on, but I didn't pull away my hand and follow the waiter. Even as we walked further away from the private dining room, I could still hear my father-in-law's loud voice.
It'll be so expensive that she won't be able to pay for it. She'll probably start crying.
If she can't afford to pay, she should wash dishes. As we headed towards a staff room, I breathed a sigh of relief because I finally couldn't hear my in-laws' conversation anymore. But why did the waiter take me here? He opened the door as I was getting more worried. A tall man with a pouty face stood in front of me. I recognized him from somewhere. Who could it be? I gazed at him seriously, and he raised an eyebrow. From that gesture, it hit me. Are you King?
Yeah, it's sure been a while, Emery.
The restaurant King was named after my friend from high school, King. King smiled and then became serious.
Emery, can you leave them to me?
Them? Do you mean my husband and in-laws?
Yeah, let's go there now.
He took my hand and wordlessly pulled me towards the private dining room. King opened the door with a bang. Everyone immediately turned to look at him. My father-in-law stood up and gave an amicable smile.
Oh, it's Chef King. You have a really serious look on your face. Did something happen? It's about Emery.
My in-laws looked shocked. King and I were classmates in high school. King was really rebellious at the time, and he skipped school often. After something happened, we began talking to each other and became friends. Though he looked aggressive, he was actually a very kind guy. After hearing what King said, my in-laws' faces both went blue.
Oh, we didn't intend to. Then please explain to me what you were trying to do.
Jose spoke up with a pathetic voice and stepped over to us. Turning to see what Jose was looking at, I saw an older man who looked like King coming towards us. I wanted to burst out into laughter, but the atmosphere in the room was intense.
Were you the people who treated my son's friend so rudely? But, boss, what happened? Won't you explain? He's wrong. There's been a misunderstanding. Hey, Emery, say something. I asked you, not Emery. I don't need rude employees like you. Don't come to our office anymore. No way! Wait, please, give me a chance. I'm incredibly sorry. Please, forgive us.
The two of them desperately apologized, and my mother-in-law began crying. Liam came over to me. He was scared and he had tears in his eyes. I told him not to be scared and patted his head. With some time, he finally calmed down and smiled again.
If you're really sincere, you should prove it with your actions. Clean the restaurant after we close tonight. People with dirty hearts like yours should learn how to clean.
King and his father took Liam and I to a separate room and gave us an incredible meal. The food was amazingly delicious, though King acted very humbly. They even made a special kids meal for Liam.
Liam, your mom is a great person.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, you probably do. Do you want me to tell you a story?
King began sharing a story from the past. King hated studying when we were in high school. His parents were elites, but he was horrible at studying, so he had a very low opinion of himself and felt like he didn't belong in his family. He skipped class so many days that he was at the verge of getting expelled. One day, King and I were in the same group for a cooking assignment in home ec class. Can I try this? Wow, it's delicious! You're so good at seasoning food!
I did it randomly.
No way! I saw how many times you sampled the food. There's no way it was random. I didn't think much of what I said, but that was the first time King had ever received a compliment. Thanks to that, King began studying cooking. Of course, he didn't become a pro immediately. He made many mistakes along the way.
I'm really useless.
You're not useless. You just need to be creative with your cooking.
Huh?
No matter what kind of delicious ingredients you use, if they aren't cooked well, they won't taste good. Measure portions properly. Try different combinations. Or let things sit overnight once in a while.
Creative.
Similarly, no matter what kind of talent one has, it doesn't mean everything they make will be perfect. So, you need to be creative. That made King finally realize. He started to aim at being a pro, and he eventually became a world-renowned chef. From then on, King's relationship with his parents improved. But after hearing the whole story, I have to admit that I didn't get it. Did I really say something like that?
Did you forget?
Mom, you're amazing! King's story didn't stop there. He spoke to his employees about me many times, so when the waiter heard my name, he recognized it and knew he had to save me. So, the store name wasn't by chance.
Yeah, you're the one who once wrote my name with a C instead of a K, right?
I'm sorry, I didn't do it on purpose.
No, I'm happy that happened. You're the only person who paid attention to me then. I thought that writing the restaurant name with a C would make it stand out and be easier to remember. So, thank you.
One of the waitstaff called to King, and he exited the room. I thought over what I said to King back then. I should also be creative with my life. If I don't do my best, of course, things won't turn out how I want them to. Looking over at Liam, I made up my mind. I will divorce Jose and start my life from scratch. 1 year later...
Hey!
King! Liam rushed to hug King, who had come over to visit. King hugged Liam back and smiled. After that time at the restaurant, King and I began seeing each other often and started dating. We're now considering getting married. I haven't talked to Liam about it yet, but I'm sure that he'll be happy. Liam was so attached to King that I was convinced of this. After that incident, my ex-father-in-law and Jose were both demoted. They screamed to their bosses for forgiveness. Large companies like theirs have complicated HR processes, so they haven't been fired yet. They're still holding on somehow in the company's shadows. King and I watched over Liam as he peacefully slept after getting tired out from playing with King. Liam is worried because he's not good at studying. He's tried his hand at cooking to be like you, but things didn't go well and he got even more sad.
Really? Isn't he very athletic?
Yeah, The other day, he got first place in a sprinting contest at school.
No need to worry about him then.
King and I made eye contact and smiled. I've always wanted to enjoy quiet time with my partner like this.
I will teach Liam the way you taught me. Everything is good at different things.
That's right. Thank you, King. King kindly patted Liam's head with his large hands. He really looked like they could be father and son.